If you ever gazed on Soviet art or propaganda posters, you would see something like this. The statues would represent the working class, and the people were being sculptured to perfection, much like the Greek statues of old, which goes into heavy contrast with modern art that either goes for the simplistic, the easily to be reproduced, or with what they like to call realism, or representation. Art like this is considered to be offensive, oppressive, while art like this is considered to be progressive and representative of the human race. So the question is, why did the Soviets, who were also concerned with feminism, equality, and fighting against oppression, choose this type of art style? Now, all of this has to do with the Cold War. You see, the Soviets wanted to show that they're not just like the West, but in fact they are better than the West. And as such, one of the aspects that they were constantly competing with was that of sports. And sports in the Soviet Union has a very interesting history. Right after gaining power in 1917, the Soviet regime started promoting sports and physical education actively. It was the duty of the worker, as well as the peasantry and the soldiers, to be in a good shape, as well as to be healthy, so that they can build what the Soviets considered a healthy nation. As such, the sport was encouraged from a very young age. And you have to take into account that the word encourage and mandatory were very blurred within the Soviet Union. Now, this promotion of physical activities reached its peak around 1930, when the great dear leader himself, Joseph Stalin, as well as other communist leaders, had guests from abroad in order to show them a spectacle that will be remembered. It was the Red Market festivity, which showed thousands of athletes from all over Russia parading with various flags as well as portraits of Stalin. For an objective onlooker, it would have been very difficult to say if this has anything to do with sports, or is it more to do with the cult of personality that the dear leader Stalin was enforcing upon its people. As such, as time moves on, it is very difficult to separate sports from politics, as many political events became celebrated through sport, and sport itself became political. One great example of this is that during an international football match between Russia's national team and Yugoslavia, the game wasn't going favorably for the Russians. As such, during halftime, the dictator himself, Stalin, phoned the locker room of the Russian players and threatened them that he finds it unacceptable for them to lose in front of, and I quote, Tito's Nazis. And having been firmly motivated, the players managed that by the end of the match to finish the game in a tie. Another example of sports mixing with politics can be found in 1945, where over 25,000 athletes from all 16 republics of the USSR took place in a giant parade with big festivities, as well as the promotion of the cult of personality which Stalin had. So how was sports being promoted throughout the Soviet Union? Because obviously they did not have access to social media. The way they would do it was through the workforce. While on television, in schools, and in universities, the propaganda and the slogan, "Healthy mind and healthy body," took place, every single school, every single farm, every single institution, every single union would have various sporting associations for amateurs. And the activists within these places would work their hardest in order to gain recruits. People who enlisted received prestige and honor, while the ones who refused would receive social stigma and questions of why aren't they being patriotic and why aren't they joining the struggle in order to improve the nation. As such, the Soviet Union became very similar to a massive factory that was manufacturing athletes non-stop. If by 1928 you'd had only 53,000 of people living in a village that would have been members of any sports association, By 1935, their number raised to 500,000. But to finally cement the union between politics and sports, you have to take into account that actual government departments would have their own sports teams. For example, the football team Dynamo was affiliated to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And the military also had its own sports team called Ussr. Imagine, if you will, today in the United States that the CIA would have its own football team and they would play matches with the football team from the Federal Trade Commission, and it would have been publicized live on television. And then maybe you can get a little bit of grasp on how the situation was in the Soviet Union by 1950. Now, while the people under the Iron Curtain were suffering from poverty and they were lacking a lot of things, some of these clubs were anything but poor, especially the large ones or the ones associated with the government. Some of them were equipped with large stadiums, large fields where people could train, swimming pools, and pretty much anything that was necessary in order to develop the physical activity of the people that were patroning them. The biggest football stadium was built in 1928 for Dynamo and had a capacity of 25,000 people. So with this much propaganda invested into keeping people healthy, you have to wonder about the Olympics. How did the Olympics treat the USSR? Well, the USSR had a complicated relationship with the International Olympics. This has largely to do with the fact that in 1920, after the Soviet Revolution, the Olympic Committee refused to recognize Soviet Russia as an entity. And by the next Olympics in 1924, this got boycotted by Stalin himself, saying that the USSR refuses to participate at such a bourgeois event. Moscow maintained this attitude of refusing to attend bourgeois events until 1952, when Russia's Soviet athletes managed to bring to the motherland second place as the most medals won internationally. However, this didn't mean that the Soviet Union would participate in the European Championship or the World Championships. Apparently, these were still bourgeois festivities. However, this didn't mean that the Soviet Union wouldn't organize its own sporting competitions where members of the Eastern Bloc would attend. It was called Spartakiada. I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. And of course, it took place in Moscow, where you had over 7,000 athletes from 17 different countries, including the United States and Germany. Seems that the bourgeoisie didn't mind lowering themselves to participate to these proletariat events. Now, it's long speculated on why the USSR actually refused to join the Olympics. Some people say that the USSR didn't want to suffer humiliation, as the United States could win medals away from them, and thus breaking the idea that the Soviet people are supreme. However, their distancing from Western sports didn't just end at boycotting the events, but it also did what every authoritarian regime loves doing, which is to change words and definition, not because people find the new words and definitions useful, but because the old words and definitions are problematic. As such, the word uppercut was changed into the Russian udarom snitsu, which means exactly the same thing, a punch that goes from bottom up. The French term suplex was now renamed into brosok progibrom. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And by the 30s, martial arts were banned. Judo and Jiu-Jitsu are two examples of martial arts that fell under the ban, and they were replaced with a new type of ideologically correct martial art called Sambo, focusing on self-defense as well as fighting unarmed. Now, if you listen to this and you think it's quite harmless, or maybe it's a good thing that the USSR encouraged people to do sporting activity, you should focus on the unholy marriage between sports and politics. And this is due to the fact that many athletes are going to face a lot of persecution. Because despite the fact that sports was being very popular and more athletes were joining, by the 30s, the people who would go to international competitions would be at great risk because they could have been accused of espionage. And it was not only them that would suffer, but it was their family that would suffer as well. Another persecution that athletes would face was from within their own ranks. You see, if you live in a country where the regime is incredibly interested on how you think, then a new way of promotion opens up. If you're a mediocre athlete and you just cannot compete with your peers, instead of training hard and managing to overcome that challenge and be better, there is a new opportunity where now you can try to cancel the person on top of you. Simply accusing them of ideological incorrectness would lead to their arrest, and as such, the person who used to have the silver medal now has the gold medal, simply because the gold medal winner, well, is now either disqualified or in prison. If you want to know how ridiculous all of this got, well, you only have to look at the ski club of the University for Sports and Tourism. This was declared by the Soviet Union to be a terrorist organization. Yes, a sports club was declared to be a terrorist organization. Its members were arrested and its leader was executed. The world champion at horizontal jumping, Nikolai Koftoon, was arrested right as he was training. And he stood more than 10 years in the Gulag because apparently his parents worked for a Chinese railway company from Harbin. Another such example is the arrest of one Nikolai Starotskin. Apparently he was also sent to the Gulag because of his victory in the USSR Cup of 1939. You see, Spartak not only managed to defeat the Dynamo team, which was owned by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, but also another team which had a very suggestive name, that of the Stalinets. And there you have it, folks. To come back to the question why Soviet art looked like this, well, it's because it was propaganda. It was meant to inspire people to become like the man and woman on the statue. And as the ideology of everything is political, including thinking, became more and more prominent, every single action that a person took had political meaning, including that of winning a football game or losing a football game. And, well, repercussions follow political dissidents, don't they? If you like this video, please consider thumb it up. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you are so inclined and charitable to donate, I have a subscribe star. It's going to be pinned in the comment section. And even very small donations help keep this channel going, as well as helps me create these types of videos for you. That requires a little bit of research and, heaven forbid, effort. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you guys there. Hopefully you enjoyed, and have a nice day.